Wait, you guys are going there?
No, it's here.
Oh.
You're going to Sisseton. So the next one we're going to cover is the presidency of George H.W. Bush. So Reagan, got finished with Reagan. He ended his presidency with two scandals, the Iran-Contra scandal and the savings and loan bailout. Your homework tonight is going to be on the savings and loan bailout. Even with those two scandals, Reagan remained very popular. We're not going to go into the savings and loan bailout because you guys are going to answer it in your homework, and then if you guys do a sufficient job of answering it in your homework, then we don't have to test on it. So that's the way that works. Unless you guys blow it off, and then I'm going to throw it in as an essay question. So George H.W. Bush was the Republican candidate. He was Reagan's vice president. This guy right here was Michael Dukakis. He was the Democratic candidate. A guy by the name of Gary Hart was the front runner. But Gary Hart had an affair with a lady on a boat and got caught, so he had to drop out of the race.
Wait, which one's Gary Hart?
Gary Hart's not in there.
Oh.
That's Michael. Yeah. So
I was hoping it was up.
there's Gary Hart, and there's a lady that he had the affair with on the boat. Just you gotta wait for it. You gotta wait for the payoff.
Before we get off.
So there's Michael Dukakis. Michael Dukakis, that's the most famous picture of Michael Dukakis rolling down the street in a tank. And here's how that played out. Bush easily steamrolled Dukakis. There's a little bit blue. Okay, fun fact about George H.W. Bush. He was out of southern Japan and grew up on the Prime Minister of Japan. Afterwards, it became known as a Busharoo. So George Bush had a few domestic successes. He supported Americans with Disabilities. So until 1990, the American with Disabilities Act hadn't been written into law. The ADA banned discrimination against citizens. It started to provide handicap spaces and ramps and things that are accessible. It's the main reason why we have a elevator in our school now. So if you have anybody with a disability, they have the ability to participate in everyday activities.
Get up. Take slow.
Take that on occasions.
Temporarily.
So a lot of the issues that farmers are having today with some of the watershed acts that are being enforced by the federal government, you can thank George H.W. for some of those. He also signed a civil rights bill into law in 1991. Another thing that happened with George H.W. in office was the 27th Amendment was passed. Talked a little bit about the 27th Amendment when we talked about the Constitution this fall. The 27th Amendment was initially put up for discussion in the late 1700s. And it stayed on, nobody voted on it, nobody decided anything for about 150 years. And then somebody was doing a paper on the Constitution, discovered that this amendment had been proposed but never voted on, fixed up the language a little bit, resubmitted it to the Congress, and they passed it, being our last amendment in 1992. The 27th Amendment says that Congress can't give themselves a raise while they're in session. It only takes place after the next election cycle. That way, if you get elected to Congress, the first thing that happened a lot of times was you get elected to Congress and you vote and give yourself a raise, which is a pretty good deal, if you're allowed to do it. 27th Amendment said you couldn't do that anymore. One of the other things that happened during during Bush's administration was he got to put a Supreme Court justice on the stand. Got to put a black justice onto the Supreme Court. Before, as they were going through the confirmation hearing, this lady right here, named Anita Hill, accused that gentleman over there to the right, Clarence Thomas, of sexual harassment. Couple of interesting facts about Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas. The presiding senatorial member of this confirmation hearing was Joe Biden. And even though there was a lot of talk about exactly what he did, basically what Clarence Thomas liked to do is he liked to watch hardcore pornography and then explain it explicitly to female coworkers. That's how, that was Clarence's jam. Seems like a unique thing, but that's what Clarence liked to do. And you gotta realize in 1992, there wasn't a lot of pornography readily available, so you had to make an effort to watch hardcore pornography. You couldn't just turn on your computer. But that's what Clarence liked to do. Clarence gonna Clarence, man. The one thing that happened with Bush is, as the economy was still doing fairly well under Reagan, we talked about how there was a significant diversion in the amount of money that America was bringing in to the amount of money that America was spending, and our deficit was raising. So Bush was under a lot of pressure to reduce the deficit, and he made a famous speech where he said, "Read my lips, no new taxes." And then he raised taxes. So because the deficit was getting out of hand, he supported the raising of income taxes in order to balance the federal budget. Also, because one of the things that happened after the savings and loan bailout was the United States had a recession. So he increased taxes as Americans were making less money and the economy took a downturn, and as you can imagine, once you start, if you're an American president, you start costing people money, you become very unpopular. Take a look at the deficit, or excuse me, that's his approval rating. And that's where we end today.